All right. Well, thanks for joining in on this session today. We're going to jump right into things here. So, in the chat, I would love for you to answer this question. What is the purpose of children's books? So, I've got to get you started with a starter task here. So, what is the purpose of children's books? To spark wonder and joy and a love for learning. Oh, I love that answer. To engage children with ideas and the world around them, to inspire and stimulate imagination. Fantastic answers. And really, it's all about teaching lessons without them realizing that they're learning. So I love that you've got the stimulating imagination and inspiring and sparking wonder and joy. This is the power of what stories can do with us, even from a young age. And today we learn in all different ways. Social media is actually one of the most pervasive ways that people learn about the world around them. And it's really not up to school teachers, or I mean, it is up to school teachers, but it's not only up to school teachers anymore, or the news or journalists. And it makes me kind of wonder, as an educator myself, why there's been such a pushback to incorporating social media or content into the classroom a little bit more. I think we need to reframe the way that we think about social media and storytelling and content, and think of it more as a vehicle for connection. And so today I'm going to be using those terms a little bit more interchangeably than you might be used to, but getting right back into it. Today is the 90th birthday of somebody that I know quite well. So it's a big celebration. And this person knows just how important it is for us to connect with each other, connect with ourselves, connect with the world around us. And if anybody knows who I'm talking about, and there's a visual cue on the back of the slide, if you know who it is, you can type it in the chat. But this person actually travels 300 days a year, spreading a message of inspiration and hope to empower people to make the world a better place. And they are quite famous from being on the covers of National Geographic. Yes, Janice, you nailed it. It's Jane, Dr. Jane Goodall, who's the foremost leading expert in chimpanzees in this world. And each time Janice is saying, just saw an amazing reel about her. Well, there's more coming up. And if you're on my account, you'll see a little bit more, because each time she comes to Canada, I get to join her on tour and create content to help expand the reach of the amazing message that she is putting out there. Because she really sums it up real nicely here. In order to connect with people, what we need to do, and what she says it best, what you have to do is get into the heart. And how do you get into the heart? With stories. So again, I'm going to be using content and stories and social media kind of interchangeably, but I really want to thank you. I really value and honor your time, and know that it's our most precious resource. So thanks for joining me here today. And I wouldn't do you dirty. I want you to know what is expected of you by the end of this, and what we're going to be talking about. So we did a little bit of an intro. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. We're definitely going to look at the then and now, but I also want to give you some takeaways, how you can actually incorporate content, social media, storytelling into your current learning environments. And then there is no growth without reflection. So I have a couple questions for you to think about at the end of this. And then if we have a little bit more time, then I'll leave some time for questions that you might have as well. But your mission is to learn ways that you can use content and social media to expand critical thinking skills and digital literacy in your learning environment. So it might not be as extreme as Tom Cruise, and then even separately as his character in Mission Impossible, but I think it's definitely just as cool. And my mission is to help you learn how to take your education outside the walls of a classroom. And if you're like, who the heck are you and why should I be listening to you? My name is Britt Gawley, and I run an agency called Founders Media, where we help people and brands and businesses tell their stories strategically through visuals like photography, videography, and social media. And actually, before starting this agency, I solely did photography. So I shot stills for 8 years, and I shot for clients like Canadian Geographic, Canada's History Magazine, Health Magazine. I've had the opportunity to photograph Olympic athletes, David Suzuki, the King and the Queen of the Netherlands. big brands like Rogers, MasterCard, Costco, and a whole bunch more. And the street cred on the educational side is before all of that, I was actually in a classroom myself. I was a high school history and geography teacher. So that's a little bit about me. But now that I've shared with you that I'm a history buff, I've got to take you to the origins of story, the origins of content. And I really believe that it's important that we take a look back to why we do the things we do as a society, and it provides us for greater context for the way that we actually interpret the world around us. But storytelling, as I'm sure you know, is nothing new. It's always been a part of our species. It's part of our history. We're social beings, and we've used it quite historically as a means of survival. And in oral tradition, there was lessons that were passed down from generation: what not to eat, what not to drink, where not to go. But we got a little bit more creative with the way that we express this, and you could think of cave art really as the first bits of visual storytelling. It dates back to the Ice Age, which is during the Upper Paleolithic, which is roughly between 40,000 and 14,000 years ago. So it's nothing new. This has been around for quite some time. But of course, we've evolved, and so is our means of communication and how we express ourselves. This is a close up of the Rosetta Stone, but we went from hieroglyphics to homing pigeons to the Persian postal service to the printing press, telegraphs, telephones, the radio, email, internet. If anybody is old enough to remember MySpace, I think we are hopefully in this, yeah, smartphones, Facebook, and now here we are with my favorite platform, which is Instagram. And this is a creator who, well, she shows off body image and she speaks about body image in a really positive light, the real natural means of that. And in this photo here, you can see she kind of shows off the difference between lighting and how you can pose, and just real life from lighting and how you can pose in a different means. But that is also nothing new. A lot of people think the whole body image conversation is something that's only come up, or Photoshop is the only thing that's come up since social media. But that is just not true. Actually, if we look at history, we can look at somebody named Joseph Stalin, who actually used to Photoshop before Photoshop even existed, which is a really interesting, if you're into history and want to talk about primary sources and how they kind of can be misleading, it's a really interesting conversation. But how was somebody like this back in those days with those types of technologies able to do that? And what really comes down to, whether we're talking about social media or content, is we as humans kind of categorize things in two different lights. And as an educator, how are you conscious of the way that you categorize things? We have typically two of these categories: good stories versus bad stories. And how do we keep up with what's going on in society? There's a lot of information coming at us all the time. We have stories, the hero's journey, where we find inspiration to keep going through times that are troubled for us. We have people that are inspiring us, that keep us motivated. We have stories that make us question our faith in humanity. But what we really need to know is whether we're using visual storytelling and narratives in our educational spheres or in our workplaces or in our families. The stories that we tell and the way that we tell them matter. Social media is actually the most commonly used means of communication in community today. So what I want you to do right now, you can close your eyes if that's easier. You can just kind of stay with me here. But I want you to imagine what a classroom looked like and felt like if you were in it 100 years ago. So really think about your senses coming alive in that classroom. Are you thinking in black and white? I don't know. But how does that differ from today's classroom? So think about that. What did it look like? Were grades all in the same classroom in a schoolhouse? Were people segregated based on gender, based on race? What did those classrooms look like 100 years ago? And how do they differ from today's? Because if you're in an environment where somebody is standing at the top of a classroom, the grand lecturer bestowing knowledge among the audience or the students, that's quite literally old school. It's the equivalent of everyone sitting around and listening to a radio. So incorporating tech and social media can actually really enhance discussion and improve the connection between people. And as educators, we know that in order for us to optimize learning potential within our student base, we actually have to make learning relevant to the learner. So how do we improve that connection? Well, we can think of social media, we can think of content and storytelling as a communication collaboration tool. Don't forget, it's a vehicle for connection. It can help us as educators keep up in the world, and it can help our students keep up in the world. And if the skills that they're learning are said to be outdated by the time that they graduate high school or university, then how do we make them adaptable to this current world? It's certainly not by telling them that they can't. So when I was teaching, I don't know if this is still a policy or not, but it would be like, leave your cell phones at the door. So students would have to come in, and this was a school policy, but students would have to plop a cell phone at the door, and they couldn't bring tech into the classroom. Now we see, of course, all the students have Chromebooks, but it's a really outdated way of thinking. And of course, there are the naysayers out there where it's, and I love like Simon Cowell, he's a little old school himself, but we know what he's all about. But is social media connecting us or disconnecting us? The naysayers are saying it's disconnecting us. They're prominently putting out there that social media is an addiction, or about the online safety, that people are getting catfished or bullied or kidnapped, and all of these things do happen. But why aren't we preparing the future to use it in a safe way? Why isn't that part of our classroom education? Social media isn't necessarily bad. It's just that we're potentially using it wrong. So how do we teach students to use it in a beneficial way that's going to enhance their critical thinking skills so that they can use social in a more beneficial fashion? We know that the way that we perceive the world is based on our individual experiences. So we really want to enhance that critical thinking so that their individual experiences can be more positive. There's also naysayers that would say that language capabilities have actually gone down since the start of social. And if you're not sure what ICYMI stands for, it's in case you missed it. And I would actually argue the whole point that language capabilities have gone down. First of all, do you need to have the best cursive writing anymore? Is that even still a relevant part of any job? Maybe for some, but very little percentage. But I would argue that the new slang, the new text talk is actually testing language. They're trying new things. It's the creation of a language in itself, really. And it's creating a way to say, I see you. It's people are learning how to communicate. And it's a really interesting conversation, again, if you're teaching social studies or civics, to explore and debate these topics that really do actually help to enhance those critical thinking skills. Now, if you're not used to incorporating social media and a little weary of it, is it going to be easy? No. And everybody knows whenever you bring any new tool into a classroom, it can be like, okay, you got to lower your expectations of yourself and how far things are going to go within those first couple days. But your students are going to learn fast and they're going to impress you. And again, I want you to think outside the walls of your classroom, because what you can do now with the use of social, with the use of content, is you can actually connect with experts. So you can invite industry and thought leaders to actually come into the conversations that you're having in real time instead of them waiting to learn from you. They can actually connect from subject matter experts and some of the smartest thinkers of our time. They can use those. And you can also use these content platforms to engage and connect with these people, which actually provides a more inclusive approach, because it's actually really important to think about who should be telling certain stories, right? Research shows that representation within the classroom not only increases feelings of belonging, but it also supports a positive school environment where students can actually feel more confident, which means that's going to actually accelerate their academic achievements. So don't be limited by those four walls of a classroom. And I'm going to share a few ways that you can actually think about incorporating content into your own learning environment. So the first way is think about it as a tool and resource. And what do I mean by that? So I've got a little TikTok playing here on your screen, which is actually a teacher who has started a teacher TikTok account. And it says, point of view, you're a teacher trying to keep up with TikTok because students find it cool. She has a massive following. The artist Drake actually reached out to her, loved I mean, she got like massive street cred with her student population because Drake sent her a message. And so you can do things like that. If you're a little bit more expressive, maybe you're a drama teacher, I don't know, but maybe you want to get out there and start your own TikTok. Maybe it's a new sense of creative expression for you, but no pressure to do that. You can simply use it as a tool or resource to build community, build rapport, just like that teacher did there, while keeping up with this rapid pace of change in our society. But you can also use visual content heavy resources like Pinterest, which are the other photos here, which is an app. And you can use that for idea generation or inspiration, or for learners that have exceptionalities with assignments that you want to incorporate more visual heavy assessments. And also think about it this way: how many jobs out there have a digital or social media component to them? So in order to prep students for the future, incorporating the use of apps, navigating these social platforms can really, really enhance their skills. Other things that you can do is to tie social media efforts into your school year. So if you are, it says Portage Community School District student interviews for spring musical on Instagram. So they started a YouTube channel. The drama teacher at that school actually had the students improving. So using skills that are in their curriculum, but also tying in the social media aspect, creating content. There's a lot going on here that can be assessed as well. And getting the school community involved, so building school spirit at the same time. So all these different points for connection, which is really unique and wasn't possible, 10 years ago even. You can use it for the yearbook. So on the right here, you have the class of 23. So remember the old little paragraphs that we used to write in our yearbook, which was just a paragraph. I really regret what I wrote in mine. I don't know about anybody else, but mine was, I won't even share it actually, but you can try and locate it maybe. I don't know if that's out there somewhere, but luckily it's in paper probably. So hopefully safe on that one. But for these kids, they can, if they're part of the yearbook club, they could, for example, record themselves, record some memories, again, get that student body active in their own academic journey. They can think about, if you're somebody who likes to take students on field trips or school trips, you can have students blog, you can have students doing a selfie scavenger hunt. Again, where they're having to navigate these platforms, they can do it in a safe way if that container is provided for them to do so. But you can also incorporate social and content at a higher level as well, where you can boost debate and critical thinking by incorporating content, just zooming it, or not zooming, this is Zoom, but I mean clicking on it, copying and pasting it, providing photo credit for where you get it from, and talking about the photo series, talking about these different pieces of content at that high level with your students. So depending on which level of learning that you're working with and which age group you're working with, you could do something like this for a social studies class, where we can look at just a visual like this and we can ask questions. What do you see? How does this make you feel? And really kind of tap into those critical thinking skills. So this is actually a photo series that was meant to make people rethink the way that the world deals with race in everyday life. And I found it quite interesting and quite moving. And it's kind of those reverse racial expectations in simple settings. So the photographer was Chris Buck, and this actually first appeared in the Oprah magazine. And the images aren't meant to point fingers, but are instead meant to encourage others to challenge their own mindset, their own unconscious biases, and the racial expectations, and then to actually talk about it in conversation. So really great kind of simple, I would say, activities that you can incorporate into your lesson planning to really stimulate discourse, to really stimulate that critical thinking that we want all of our students to have, no matter what age they are. And this can be done with children's books images as well. So there's so many different ways that you can do that. The next way is to incorporate trends. So we all hear about social media trends and they're all over the place. Any platform you go on to, like TikTok or Instagram, is a really popular place. YouTube Shorts, but short form content is very, very popular, and you can actually use it in the classroom in different ways to help motivate and engage your students. A lot of students today actually they gravitate towards quick digestible information, and trends are a really simple way to build rapport just like that with your students. Say, I see you, I know what's going on, I keep up with society. And for example, here's one that's going on right now. It's called the of course trend. So we've got Mariah Carey here, where she goes, of course, I'm Mariah Carey, of course I can hit 8 octaves. I'm Mariah Carey, of course I work out in stilettos and a gold dress, because she's known as a diva. Or there's Kim Kardashian, who says, I'm Kim Kardashian, of course I have a red light therapy bed in the office. So how can you incorporate this trend, the of course trend, into, say, a geography class or a math class? Like, I'm a fraction, of course and then have the students explaining what a fraction is by using the social media trend. It doesn't necessarily have to be recorded. You can just take inspiration from the social media trend itself. Or you can have it recorded, and that can be a student project. For geography class, I'm from Eastern Ontario. Of course, we shovel an average of X amount of snow per winter, which I don't really miss living in Vancouver. I'll tell you that. I do not miss shoveling and chiseling ice off my window. But that's one way that you can incorporate social media trends and content trends into classrooms. And this can work for elementary, this can work for high school, this can work for post-secondary and on. Another really interesting thing that we're seeing happening right now is that Google has been the go-to search engine for years, but right now younger internet users are actually starting to shift away from Google in favor of social media. And Google recently revealed that around 40% of young internet users, so this is ages 18 to 24, actually turn to TikTok or Instagram instead of Google Maps or the search bar. Which is crazy to think about, but that's where things are going. And this trend has been so noteworthy that there's actually a New York Times article that refers to TikTok as the new search engine for Gen Z. So something interesting, something to kind of, if you haven't explored that yourself, if you're not on those platforms yourselves, something to take note of, that your student base and the ones coming up, this is a search engine that they are using. And actually, there's other academic institutions that are dedicating accounts to feature valuable information for prospects as well. So this is from the Toronto Metropolitan University of Undergraduate Admissions, and they are using it as a helpful guide to introduce information about scholarships for potential applicants. So that's just another way that you can kind of think about how people are using content. It's also as a search engine. Now, the next one is actually, I think, my favorite way to incorporate content, and that's to incorporate trending memes that can be used as a classroom tool. And so I want you, before I talk about memes a little bit more, I want you to think about that we are talking about content and storytelling and social media today, but what we're really talking about is creating a sense of culture in your classroom. And that's really, really important. And you can do this by incorporating memes, which is crazy to think of, but it's true. You could have a meme of the week, which actually can create a shared experience for your classes. And they'll be really excited to see what you have in store from them if they know that they can expect that. This was actually, when I was teaching, one of the ways that I really connected well with students. So I used to have memes waiting on the screen when I was teaching a history class as my students would file in. So they would instantly have an idea for the lesson that we would be learning about that day, and it would grab their attention. It would actually file them in pretty quick. I didn't have a lot of lates because they didn't want to miss the meme. So there's different ways that you can engage learners. It's not just in the subject matter itself, but it's also in being an active participant in your class in general. So taking something that's popular and trending on the internet, and you can actually create these memes yourself. You can copy them. if you know what's relevant to your student body, to your learners, you can create content specific ones for them or find them. But when using content relevant memes, students are actually provided with visual and verbal content that's meaningfully connected to each other. So a meme only works when the words and images are linked to each other to create sense. And this actually strengthens comprehension in your student body. So, and being a history buff, I have a whole bunch of history ones up here as examples today. And history, Henry VIII is actually one of my favorite characters. So, but this meme would appeal to the gamers out there, which, I mean, I don't know about your student body, but when I was teaching high school, I remember I had one day when I had almost no students because the release of Call of Duty came out that day and everybody stayed home sick to play Call of Duty. So you can incorporate kind of gaming, what's relevant to them, and history, what's relevant to their learning, in a meme. You can also check for comprehension, and you can use a meme as a hook, like I did in my classroom. You can activate their learning, and they can further navigate through those social platforms with a YouTube link. So you might have a meme to start and then a YouTube link for them to activate their learning. And then they can demonstrate their learning with having them explain the meme. This is going to expand their critical thinking, their digital literacy skills, and the navigating of the links is something that they can take with them in the future. And if you're an educator, you're probably familiar with Bloom's taxonomy. So, and if you're not familiar with it, it's a framework for categorizing educational goals. But memes actually invite elaboration, which in a form of analysis and synthesis in the material with students. So they have to understand, they have to explain, they might have to create a meme, and students have to actually make connections between their knowledge and their observations in the real world. So this is something that, you know, somebody who's walking into your classroom as an administrator might be like, is that, why do you have a meme? And you're, well, this is why. You could get into a technical discussion with them about Bloom's taxonomy if you want to, but you know, they need to be able to explain the concepts or ideas in their own words and break down bigger ideas into their essential components. And it really invites elaboration, which is beneficial for their learning. So I'm a big pusher for memes, if you haven't been able to tell, but you can also do different types of formative assessment with them using memes. They can create a meme or they can locate a relevant meme depending on where they're at. But here's an example of, you know, when you're trying to formulate a password. So the Byzantine Empire in 565 was going really strong in historical sense and then was not doing so great by the year 1453. So just a funny little thing there. But now I want you to think about these different tools and resources and ways that you can integrate social media or content and do it in that safe way. And I want you to think about, so this is the reflective part. This is the part where we're going to, you know, get back into it and grow a little bit. Which way do you already use content in your learning environment? So you can either type it in the chat, you can keep it to yourself, but are you using content? Do you use social media at all in your learning environments or your work environments? Maybe you're not using it yet, but what do you want to try? After a presentation like this, where I threw a whole bunch of stuff at you really quickly, what would you like to try? Is there something that you haven't yet that you're maybe interested in exploring? Have I piqued your interest in one way? We have one answer here. I incorporate social media to teach how to locate and debunk misinformation, disinformation. Yeah, it's a great tool to be able to do that and have that discourse for sure. Oh, thinking about how to use the of course trend. I love that. And that's just one of many trends out there right now. So you can Google or you can go to TikTok and use that as the search. That might actually be better now. But you can kind of look at what's going on trend-wise there. I work with teacher candidates mostly in their 20s, and I think this would resonate. I can guarantee that it will. I have another question for you. Did you achieve your learning objective, which was to learn ways that you can use content and social media to expand some critical thinking skills and digital literacy in your learning environments? But that's That's my gig for today. And thank you so much for being part of this. I do have time for some questions if you have any, but if you are interested in connecting online, because it is that vehicle for connection, and a lot of the content that I create is hopefully like my friend Jane's and is hopeful and inspiring, and definitely lots of humor infused in there. You're welcome to connect with me here. I'm on Instagram and TikTok and just starting on YouTube. So feel free to connect with me online on any of those platforms. And if you have any questions, feel free to write anything in the chat. If you're curious about different platforms or integrating content, if there's something that you're curious about.
Hi, Britt.
Hey,
Thanks for your presentation. Yeah, I loved all of the ideas. My brain's just like going wild thinking of ways I can start incorporating this into the content I already have for my courses. So I think there's like a lot of connections and different ways of like infusing alternative assessment, I think.
mm-hmm.
It's particularly important, I think, right now with the onset of AI and just like trying to revamp the way that we are asking students to kind of showcase their work. So I think that's really brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. And just on that point for AI, video is something that, yes, there's like deep fakes and everything like that with AI, but in terms of connecting human to human, video is one of those things that will not be replaced because it can't be. So it is a great form to think about in terms of assessment and incorporating that into the future as well.
I think a lot of the resistance I get from, and I mean, I teach anyone basically in the field of education. So I'm wondering, like in terms of digital access divides, many of the teachers I support are working in Indigenous communities or in
Mm-hmm.
communities that
Mm-hmm.
don't have incredible access to, reliable Wi-Fi or devices. And so that's a huge
Yeah.
question, obviously. But I'm wondering, like, if you've come across anything or any kind of resources to support educators to be able to make those connections to social media with those limitations.
That's a really good question. I haven't come across anything specifically on that note. I have come across different communities that speak to those issues.
Mm.
It's almost like a means for those communities to have more community. It's just online and it's broader. It's not within their necessary geographic location. It's more countrywide. But I haven't seen anything in terms of the struggle to access resources in that way or Wi-Fi. But really, really great question.
It's a big question. I just,
It's a big question, and
yeah.
it's an important conversation as
Hmm.
well. It's the accessibility of it as well. So certainly. I'm just reading Janice's question here. I also work for a school district and wondering if you ever hear of pushback from parents, caregivers about the use of social media and how you address that. So absolutely, I mean, the naysayers are real, folks. And I am always of the opinion, and it is opinion, and it's an educated opinion, but it does more good than it does harm as long as we are using it in a safe way within a safe container. Um, Now, school districts and school boards and schools might all have different policies, and you do have to, obviously, wherever you are employed, you do have to follow the code of ethics and whatever their whatever their statements are for that. But it's definitely something to, if you are getting a lot of pushback within the professional work environment, and you think that it might be a helpful resource within your classrooms or within your school district, it's a conversation that you can have potentially with the administrators or at the general meetings. It's definitely something to bring up because it is helping to prepare kids for the outside world and become more adaptable to the real world that's out there, which is part of our job as educators. So, so yes, the pushback is always going to be there. One way or the other, you're not going to ever make everybody happy, and there are some very practical reasons why some people cannot be on social media. Some people in the school population do have protective situations. Let's say that they can't be online, but those are fewer. So you can incorporate social media in a group setting. It doesn't have to be individual. And again, you can pull from social media. You don't have to have necessarily students or educators per se on the platforms themselves. You can pull from social media as inspiration, like incorporating the of course trend, or using a meme that's popular and trending that you've seen that you can pull into your classroom, which that still makes it accessible for everybody within your classroom because they don't have to have access to the resources like Jamili was talking about. So, and Janice, I hope I answered your question for you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Britt. It's something, I think it also depends on the age of students. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, when we think about K to 12 and, how parents or guardians feel about their children being on social media and,
Mm-hmm.
honoring those concerns,
Mm-hmm.
um, as well. And I think your points about students, and images of children being used as well from classes
Yeah.
and in
Yeah.
protecting students. So I think there's a lot of layers to this, of course. So,
Definitely.
that idea that you shared about pulling from social media as opposed to students being on social media is, I think, one way, when I work with teachers, is a way to, you know, shift the thinking about that a little bit, right? That we can
Certainly.
still expose and help understand the language and the world of social media, without necessarily being on it. So yeah, thinking about that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and it's a great question, and it's quite relevant. I would say it's one of the bigger questions. And in my experience, having worked in multiple school boards, I know that in terms of when it comes to kids being online or being in photos, even for school photos and whatnot, they generally have to sign a permission form at the beginning of the school year, and then they get logged whether they can or can't participate in something. So typically a teacher would know at the beginning of a school year within their class if anyone wouldn't be able to participate in something like that, no matter what age they are. So that's another thing just to consider as well. But yeah, I mean, this presentation is not necessarily to say, hey, we should be getting, kindergarten classes, tapping, they love the iPad, but not everybody wants their kids on iPads early. And that's understandable for many different reasons. But this is more to open up a conversation about how social media, how content can actually nourish those critical thinking skills as they move into their future growth opportunities, and how you can kind of do that and optimize learning potential in your classroom. So yeah, we don't want anybody too young on there. Well, thank you so much, all of you, for joining today. I do have another presentation that's coming up. It's actually for high school students. Specifically, it's going to be Storytelling 101. So that's also on the Edith Lando Virtual Learning Center's website. But if you have anybody within your school district or school board or your school community that might be interested, who might have a voice that they want to get out there and learn about how they can use storytelling to do so, that's going to be a presentation geared towards high school students specifically. All right, thanks everyone so much.